So, hey everyone, and welcome to the Permissionless Learning Podcast. Today we have Jason Bosco with us, which I think by now everyone knows is the co-founder of Typesense. So, Typesense is a lightning fast open source search tool, which is a competitor to Elasticsearch and Algolia. And I've used all three of these tools, and I can say that what these guys are doing at Typesense is something special because if you try to set up any of those tools, you'll realize how quick and easy it is to set Typesense up and get it started with your database. So Jason and his co-founder Kishore have been building Typesense for over 6 years while working a full-time job, and recently they have jumped full-time into it. And right now, I think I'll let Jason take the role. So, Jason, why don't you tell us a bit about your journey from here in India to where you are right now?
Yeah. So Kishore and I went to college together in India. We did our undergrad in computer science, and we would spend a good chunk of our time, even while in college, thinking about different ideas to work on and different apps and we were always trying to look for the next thing that scratches our itch or interests our some new technology that's coming out. So we'd always be curious and trying to build something with interesting technology. Like that was mainly the thing how it started. And we I, and over these more than I think now 14 years, we've actually built 13, 14 products, and not necessarily one product per year, but at various points in time, we probably have worked on multiple in certain years. And all of these were side projects while we were, first started out with college, and then I moved to the U.S. to do my master's, and then started working jobs, full-time jobs, and meanwhile Kishore was working full-time jobs. So like all of these things, that 13, 14 products were all side projects, uh, and over time, some of these side projects did well. Some of them kind of fizzled out. Some of them didn't take off at all. So there's a big spectrum of products and outcomes, I should say. And then Typesense was one product that it started out as our own itch to solve a pain point we were seeing, which is dealing with Elasticsearch. And at that time,
Right.
it was pretty hard to set up Elasticsearch clusters and tweak them and scale them. And that's how Typesense started. Is like, how hard would it be to build our own search engine? And so we started there, but it was a lot of work we didn't know at the time, but it was good we didn't know at the time. So we kind of started out building it without too much expectations. And then in 2020 is when it started taking off. And we did a couple of Hacker News posts before that. And after
Yeah.
that, in 2020 is when we said it's an open source alternative to Algolia. And that's when it started resonating with a lot of people. And people were starting to ask features and seeing the traction. I left my full-time job, then Kishore left his full-time job shortly after, and now we're working on it full-time.
Right. Yeah. So, you worked for Dollar Shave Club right out of college. So, I guess people in India might not be aware of what Dollar Shave Club is, but it is basically a subscription-based startup, like I think Beardo in India, which or Manscaping, so which they send razors and all of the male shaving kits on a monthly basis. But
Oh, I
yeah,
see.
that
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I've heard about. I think it's called Bombay Shaving Club. I think that's the only one I've heard about in India, but it looks like there's one more.
yeah. So
Nice.
so why don't you tell us a bit about that journey? Was your so did you join a startup because you wanted to build products, or what was that just where you landed up? real journey?
I actually was very conscious about wanting to join a startup. So I actually was even so Dollar Shave Club. I joined after I think the second. It was my third startup. So even before that, I was at another startup, and then that got acquired. Actually, even before that, I was at another startup, and then joined another one that got acquired. Then joined Dollar Shave Club, uh, and I started out as the second engineer on the team. And when I left, I was VP of engineering there. About 6.5 years later, started out as the lead engineer. So I built some of the core e-commerce systems and billing system. Uh, uh, some of the core components like the communications platform that sends out emails, etc. So built V1s of all of those, and then as we needed to scale how fast we do things. Then we started hiring more people, and I started building teams around those products. And over time, I was uh, we had a team of about 60 to 65 engineers when I left. And that was, I mean, I'd say that journey was amazing in that uh, it was, startups are usually fast paced, and this was no exception. But through the journey, there was also a big inflection point in the company's journey, which is we got acquired by Unilever, which is like I believe it's the third largest CPG company in the world. So going through that acquisition process was quite interesting, and all the due diligence process that happens during the acquisition, and like having a front row seat to that was super interesting. And also, I switched from being an individual contributor to people management for the first time when I was at Dollar Shave Club. And so, going from an individual contributor to a people manager, that was also a very interesting transition for me. And in the middle, there was a brief period of time where I was programming, and I was also people managing a little bit. And that was a very stressful time. And over time, I slowly stopped coding. But I always had this itch to code. I would scratch that itch with all the side projects that I was working on. And so, I always like to say I was using both. I like to use both parts of my brain. During the day it was all, sometimes back-to-back meetings for like 8 hours or so, and then coming back home, I'd be like, I'd work on Typesense or one of the other projects that we've had, and and so I enjoyed it. So I scratched my itch for programming, and I was also able to keep in touch with latest tech through that. And so yeah, so after that, I actually left Autoshake Club, joined another company called VeryShop in the e-commerce space as well, but in the multi-category, like it was into fashion, home goods, beauty products, etc.
Yeah,
And then that's around when Typesense in 2020 is when Typesense started becoming popular, and then I jumped into Typesense full time.
I see. And throughout these years, how did you balance your time between TypeSense and your full-time job?
I'd say, I mean, the my full time job definitely always had priority. Like there were, it would ebb and flow. I would try my best to at least spend, I would say maybe let's say maybe 8 hours, 8 to 10 hours a week on Typesense or one of the other side projects, and the remaining time would always be, would be. I'll be in the office, back when we used to go to the office. Uh, and so I really didn't have a choice. Like it was like, it was nice that the commute, my commute was the one that split my time. And, sometimes even weekends would be consumed my day job. But I think it was, I would say any free time I found, quote unquote free, my hobby is also programming, it turns out. and I play music every now and then, but I'd say programming is my main hobby as well. So doing something that I loved didn't feel like additional work to me, and that's how I feel like I was able to keep building the projects that I was working on. And also, every time there was a new user signed up, or a user was giving us feedback, and like every interaction with users actually using the product, that was another major motivation for me, to say, even if I'm tired, like let's say I get back home at like 7 p.m., and then from 7 p.m. to like 1 a.m., like that used to be my a productive time of working on side projects. And
Oh,
of course, it's not sustainable. Looking back, I don't know how I pulled it off for this long. But I would say that used to be my productive time. But even when I'm tired, the thing that always kept me going was the fact that there's people actually using this, and like people get value out of these things that I'm building. And I think that motivation, just that thought that someone else is finding this useful, kept me going, I should say.
right. So, one question which came up and I also found interesting myself was that there's generally a indie hacker mentality, right? That you work with a project for a few years and then if it doesn't work well, then you jump onto another project.
Mm.
So, how, I mean, you similarly worked on a lot of projects throughout your, uh, I guess, side project career, but Typesense is what stuck and you stuck with it the longest, I think. So, how did that end up happening?
I would say, in the case of Typesense, so all the other projects that we worked on are, I would say, we were trying to go after a niche, which is typically how you, especially when you're a small team, you try to go after a niche and do that niche very well. Like that's the philosophy we had for all the other projects that we had worked on. Uh, but in Typesense's case, I think it's a unique product in that, like, the scope of search is so large that I feel like every single product out there, site or app, is eventually going to need search in some capacity, if only just to search through their internal user record. So search is, as a problem space, is huge, and the market is huge. And if we it was very hard to say this is a search engine just for X, and I felt like that would do the technology that we were building kind of disservice if we painted it that way. And that's why we said, okay, this is as big of a thing that we're going to be building. If like if there was a project that we were going to jump into full time, it is going to be Typesense, just because of how broad of a scope there is for adoption. That, combined with the fact that it seems like existing solutions out there, people are generally kind of gotten accustomed to live with the pain. I mean, us included, before we started working on Typesense, uh, or very expensive to start out with. So we were like, I think there's enough of a pain points that us and our peers that we saw were facing, that we were like, okay, I think this is going to be the big thing that we're working on. And we knew we always wanted to do this full time, which is working on things full time, working on our own product full time. And we realized that, okay, Typesense is that thing, because it's huge, has a lot of opportunity, and the market is big, and also the technology is like, uh, I'd say, well, also it's an open source product as well, unlike all the others we worked on in the past. So that the ability to engage with a lot of people on a deeper level than just a customer builder relationship, which is what happened with all the previous products. Here, I
Right.
think collaboratively building the product together with feedback, I think that's been that was also another motivating factor.
I see. And why did you choose search? So, I mean, you touched upon the topic that you felt that Elasticsearch was too difficult to set up, but just wanted to know what the thinking behind that was.
I mean, it's exactly that. I'd say it was mainly to scratch a personal itch, and then it grew into what it is today. So starting from 2015 and then in 2018 is when we actually open sourced it, when we figured that, oh, this has sufficient number of features for people to actually find it useful besides us. That's when we open sourced it. Uh, and it's been, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so Elasticsearch, and then as it seemed like the other players who were starting out to solve the problem of Elasticsearch being too complicated were going down the path of SaaS proprietary software,
Right.
and because of that, they were also raising their prices over time. So we were like, okay, there's enough of no one has yet solved this with an open source angle, which comes with it with it a whole bunch of uh, uh, benefits. So that's where we were like, okay, it's a pain point worth solving, uh, and it's something that we personally felt. And interestingly, I would say probably two other products that we worked on were pain points that we personally felt. All of the others were just us observing and trying to see if we can solve a pain point for someone else. Whereas, and that's another big difference with Typesense is that because we are like, we are engineers ourselves, and solving a pain point for ourselves actually also ends up solving the pain point for a huge population of developers. So, that's another thing that was very interesting about Typesense for us as a product.
I see. So were you using Typesense internally for any of your other products before, or was it just a standalone product?
No, it was a standalone product. I mean, we of course we tried to dog food our own things, but I would say given that we were working on it as a side project until 2020, I would say it didn't have all the features that, at least in e-commerce, like it didn't have all the features that a typical e-commerce site would need. So I wasn't able to use it in production as much as I wanted to. But then, once I had more time in 2020, that's when we quickly built up all the features that you typically need in an e-commerce store, and I was able to use all the experience that I've had before to be able to focus on features like that.
I see. And if anyone has a look at the Typesense code base, you'll realize that most of it is written in C++. So I guess that's quite an interesting choice. Why did you choose C++? Was it something you were comfortable with or used at work regularly?
Oh, oh no! It was uh, it was mainly for performance. Like at the time, if you needed like raw performance, you had really no other choice, and so there was C++ and nothing else. And I don't think today there's Rust, which is more popular, but at that time, like Rust wasn't around, at least as far as I remember. But even today, I feel like if we were to, if Typesense didn't exist and we were to start Typesense again, I think we would still pick C++, just because of
I
the
see.
stability and the community that, I should say, the community of libraries that the C++ ecosystem has, because it's been around forever and people have like used it and established best practices and patterns and also open source libraries that have been battle tested at scale, that we can take advantage of. Like for example, the HTTP server that we're running inside of Typesense, that is open sourced by Fastly, which is one of the
Oh,
largest CDNs in the world,
right.
and they run it on all their edge servers, and they contributed into this H2O HTTP library, uh, and that's something that we're using in Typesense. So we didn't have to reinvent the wheel with building our own HTTP server and all the overhead that comes with that. So in C++, such a library exists, but in something like Rust, for example, it does not exist yet because the ecosystem is new. People are just starting to write all these libraries, and even if those libraries exist, they haven't been tested in, like, battle tested in production. Uh,
Right.
and so I think to build a stable product that is able to scale well confidently, I would say I would still pick C++ any day.
So one, I mean, I know that C++ type checked by default, but I guess there are certain areas in C++ like index out of bounds and other things which can cause the application to break. So how do you deal with those? I
I
mean,
mean, we run it through Valgrind to watch for any potential leaks, etc. And but otherwise, it's I mean, there is definitely you can shoot yourself in the foot with C++. So I'd say it takes extra careful review, after you've written code to make
yeah,
sure that bad things you're not doing anything bad. And we've mostly, I mean, of course, that said, like in some of our internal builds, of course, there are, we've run into memory leaks and things like that, and usually like running it through Valgrind and debugging it uncovers these. So it's not as as painful. Sure, there's no like compile time check, but there are other tools out there that help help make the process easier.
right, right. And how do you do your code review process? So do you and Kishore review each other's code, or how does it work?
Actually, we don't. We don't review our code per se, but we review like architecture. So we discuss things, any feature that we work on in either the Typesense open source or Typesense cloud. Really, anything across the board, we discuss that first and make sure we're aligned on how we're going to approach this. What uh, uh, how what the end users interface into this feature is going to be. So we design the feature from that perspective first, and then we each own different parts of the code bases across the different products, and we basically get it done, and then we basically test each other's features that we're building, uh, and that's where we're like we kind of find any issues or user experience issues, for example, or memory leaks, etc. And that. So I'd say the review happens not at the code level, but at the design level,
Architecture.
and then at the feature level. And I know this will probably sound controversial, but actually that has helped keep us moving super fast. Versus nitpicking things at the code level. And we've both been around the block, and we we've seen a thing or two, so we were able to say, uh, it's our either our tests will catch issues, or our manual reviews of each other's feature will catch issues, or we catch issues at design time. So if all of these check out, then at the code level, we try to keep things simple anyway, and like we have tried to avoid like complicated abstractions, and uh, like keeping it super simple is something that we strive to do. So I would say from that perspective, review is we've already done a lot of pre-work ahead of the review, so
Right.
code level review is not really that needed from what we've seen.
I see. See. So,
It's
uh,
of course not the standard. When we're when we have uh, like our larger team, for example, we go through code reviews, etc. And but between Kishore and myself, we don't really review each other's code.
I see. So, I guess we can take on some audience questions at this point. So, Ankur, you had requested to speak, so I'll just add you right now. And Hari as well, like you can request to speak again, so I can add you as a speaker. Uh, Ankur,
Hey Jason, a user of TypeScript and Typesense, and I really feel
Hey,
you
Ankur.
folks have really huge potential to make it big. If at some point you really decide to, take some funding and build a bigger business, just wanted to know why not go on that route right now, or and do you rule out going down that route even in the future?
Great question. So I would say we have not ruled it out for sure, and it's a question of I would say at this point need, because we are kind of, so we want to make an honest attempt at building a business with customer revenue first, and the because something that I've seen, especially with others, SaaS companies, is that once they raise funds, they have to go enterprise and upmarket, and to that end, they start raising prices and focus only on like the Fortune 1000, etc. But our goal is to like democratize access to this search technology, and that, I don't think will be done in typical VC timeframes, which is usually like by year, 4 or 5. I think you have to show that that it's going to be the next big thing, and you need to conquer the world, type of adoption. I think that for something to really take hold in developers' mindshare, it's going to take much longer. And pushing that too fast, too soon, I feel like might hurt adoption in some ways, because you don't want to come across as too salesy uh, too fast. So that's something. That's one primary reason, just from a product's perspective, like we want a product and adoption perspective, we want it to be as seemingly organic as possible. So that's one thing. The other thing is, of course, usually with raising more funds comes the expectation that you will also start hiring more people. All good things, but at this point, I feel like if we, I'd rather us spend more time on the core product itself. And being small at this stage is actually such a big competitive advantage to us right now, that we're able to get much more done by, by keeping the team small, versus, let's say even with like, I don't know, 10 people, the communication overhead is sufficiently large, that might, I worry that might slow down our progress with maturing Typesense as a product. So that's been our thinking so far. But I'd say, it does feel, we've had probably like about 24 VC firms reach out to us so far, and like these are like name brand VCs reaching out cold, and like it feels nice to be courted. But yeah, we've been just saying that not yet. And when we will raise funds is, let's say we find a big opportunity that we have to go after, or in whatever shape or form that takes, or we say that, okay, this is the thing where we're going to invest a lot of our time, and it's taking, and we're not able to invest that time in a particular area, and we need additional help, and we are not able to hire fast enough based on customer revenue. That's when I think we'll start looking for venture capital. And then the third one finally would be, if raising funds gives us any type of distribution benefits, that could be an interesting thing as well. But so far, our first choice would be to try and do this thing with customer revenue.
I understand the wisdom of what you're saying, having worked at startups and not, jumping on that execution treadmill as soon as you
Right.
raise money. Yeah. So I guess I see that. Thanks for answering my question. Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, a follow-up question based on what you just said right now, Jason. So I had read Dan Liu's article on San Francisco versus the East Coast, like the Boston area recently, and what he talked about. I mean, I think it was an archive of a conversation, and inside of that conversation, like people said that the internet would probably not exist if it was in the Silicon Valley,
Ah.
because people would want a fast turnaround on building it, while MIT was happy to fund that project for 30 or so years. So,
Interesting.
yeah. So, do you think that Typesense, like it exists right now? I mean, it wouldn't have been able to exist if you had to have a fast turnaround on it rather than the time you have been able to spend on it right now.
Yeah, I think so, because I think there's certain technology like search, which is like, it's not like building any other SaaS application where the technology is not the thing that you're solving for. Instead, it's usually figuring out distribution, where your market is, where what set of features appeal to your market, and finding that market. So that's a different thing that you can like scale up really fast. Whereas something like Typesense is like core technology, and the technology itself needs time to bake. And that's one big reason, for example, we didn't jump into it full time right when we thought, oh, we're going to work on the next big thing after Elasticsearch. Like we didn't think, oh, we've got an amazing idea and we're going to start doing it full time. So I would say actually working on Typesense part time helped in maturing the product over such a long period of time. Well, I guess relatively speaking, but over like 5 years, because it's not like we sat one day and we penned out all the entire architecture and voila, and then we started building it. It's like every day was like trial and error, almost saying that, oh, this works and this doesn't work, and then benchmarking it and saying this works and this doesn't work. And it's almost like a lot of sweat went into trials, went into seeing what works, and also weeding out all the things that don't work in trying to find a product that works. So that process, I feel like, just cannot be expedited. Like if you expedite it, you're probably missing out on any potential use cases that you're locking away right now, or I feel like that's just the nature of like hard problems like search, and that's why I think it's going to take you know continue to take long periods of time for the product to bake. I would say, like, marinate and bake.
Right. Yeah. So, does anyone else have any questions right now? So, both Pranavs, Hari, you can request to speak. They'll add you. Or, yeah, Ankur, if you have any other question as well. Or, I mean, to keep the ball rolling, I have another question from my DMs, which is at what point of your career should you think about starting up? Or, I mean, like primarily focus on your side project rather than your full-time job.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what you just said. Like that, especially because that's our journey. Like, I think jumping into doing a startup just so that you can say you're doing a startup and jumping into it full time, I think is just too risky and you'll be time constrained in that you have a fixed, depending on how much you're saving up for to take care of your, like, living expenses. You're putting yourself on a clock to say this is how much time, and it's I have to figure this out, and that's usually a very stressful situation to be in, to really try and think about the problem that you're solving, and giving yourself sufficient latitude to discover the product. First of all, you might think that this is the idea that I have and I'm going to start executing on it, but then as you start working, you might have to pivot a couple of times to really know what you want to build. So that iteration time takes a while, and having that be time constrained, I feel like is not ideal in my opinion. So I would encourage, and I mean, you could say maybe survivorship bias, but based on what's worked for me, I would say is to always, like, don't quit your job, don't quit. If you're in school, don't quit school. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, Experiment with things on the side, and also that also gives you more latitude to build and throw away, and not say that, oh, this is what I'm going to focus all my time on. You can just build 5 different things, and if one sticks, that's good. Otherwise, you move on to the next thing. So give yourself that latitude, I would say. And then the thing that you need to spend your time on, I will manifest itself from from what I've seen.
I see. I see. Well, have you had more than a few people join in as speakers by the
Oh,
time
cool.
we had this answer ended? So, Pranav Mandre, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, hey, hi Akash, and yeah, hi Jason. First of all,
Hi, Pranav.
thanks for permissionless learning, like for setting up the stage. And I had like two questions. Like I joined a bit late, so I'm not entirely sure if this is answered already. But if it is, please like carry on to the next one. My first question was being an open source. And I
Oops,
had like
sorry. That's
Pranav,
my bad.
yeah, so yeah.
Pranav, sorry, your voice is a bit tinny. Maybe if you could move away from the microphone a little bit, I guess that would fix that.
Okay, is it better now?
Yeah, yeah, much better.
Yeah, cool. So my first question was, how do you find your very initial collaborators for the open source software system? And my second question was, what is your idea about doing pre-sales for the product?
So finding collaborators. So if you're specifically talking about open source products, I would say it's good to initially at least start with people you know. I mean, like I mentioned, Kishore and I knew each other for a really long time, and we worked on other things. And this was another product that we decided to work on. I think that's still good for other projects as well, like people you know in real life. That's the I would say it's good to get like that's a good because you already have you've established some rapport and you're able to build on that to then start collaborating on open source products. But once you have that initial and I don't think 10 people coming together and saying I'm gonna we're all going to work on open source. This one open source product that's very hard just in terms of communication overhead. Uh, so I would recommend like starting with you know even just yourself or just you and one more person, building the product up to a certain stage where you've already figured out all the direction that it needs to go in, and you have a set of open issues that you need help with. That's when I would recommend then adding more people into the mix. Um, and then your second question was about pre-sales. So, I mean, if you have the opportunity to do pre-sales, by all means, do that. And I would say do pre-sales even before you have the product, not just an artificial barrier. Like, of course, if you have physical products, you definitely want to do pre-sales. But if you have, I would say do pre-sales even if you have a SaaS product, because that helps you validate whether people are willing to pay for your idea or not. I would say it is generally harder to do in a SaaS because people want to use the thing before they think whether it's worth money or not. So for that one, maybe a slight variation of pre-sales would be is to just put up a landing page and with realistic looking screenshots with pricing pages, etc. But then when people click on sign up, tell them that we haven't yet launched. Sign up to be notified, and that's a good way to validate your market. And also, if you show this thing as people are clicking on the pricing page buttons to sign up, you'll know which plan, how much they're willing to pay as well. So that's a good way to do a slightly altered version of pre-sales for at least SaaS products.
Thanks, Jason. Got it. Actually, one more follow-up question regarding the pre-sales thing. Like,
Uh-huh.
as you mentioned in the software development perspective, that you'll collaborate with the people you know first. So, in case of pre-sales, I think generally startups would like all the people involved in the startup will start doing their own pre-sales themselves. But if there is a scenario where you could collaborate with an individual who has been working with startups over sales, so would you do that in that early stage? Like, what is your founder perspective on it?
So you're saying that someone outside of your startup is willing to help you with pre-sales? Is that what you said meant?
Yeah, if there's a collaborator who can help startups with specifically pre-sales, so as a founder, would you like collaborate with them, or like stick to having the team do the pre-sales?
I mean, I would say if the person has a huge audience, or if and they're willing to put your product in front of of their audience, then definitely that's valuable. But otherwise, if it's just someone to help with, doing the logistics of pre-sales, that then I would say probably no, because when you do your own pre-sales, you also get a lot of learning by doing that, and that is valuable learning that you don't want to lose out on if someone outside of your team is doing the pre-sales for you. So the only exception to that is if that person has like a huge audience that they can tap into, then by all means, because that gives you a lot of distribution. So that's I guess the nuanced answer.
Okay, got it. Thank Jason.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Pranav, for the question. Pranav Natekar, you're up next.
Hey, hi Akash. Hi Jason.
Hey, Pranav.
So, Jason, I stalked you a bit on LinkedIn, and I see you went to USC, right?
Yep.
So I am kind of a aspiring master student, and I also want to like kind of get into this open source environment, but for hardware. So what would
Okay.
you suggest? Yeah, this is kind of a new like LLVM compilers or that kind of thing. So, what would you suggest? Like, how do I start up from now? And when I go there, how can I help myself?
Let's see. So I am not too familiar with the open source hardware space, but I can tell you maybe in general, if you find look up for open source projects on GitHub, and try engaging with them. I think start something small, as like if their documentation can be improved, for example, and and I'm not talking about just spelling mistakes, but if you especially if you are familiar with the product and you've used the product and you're like oh, the product can be used in this particular way, see if you could maybe contribute articles into the documentation saying here's how you can use this to do this, or write about that project in your own on dev.to or whatever, wherever open source hardware project articles are written. I guess like write about that open source project, share it with the project authors, and I'd say essentially try to see if you can be helpful to the projects that you like, that you use, that you look up to, and over time you should usually get to know the more active contributors in that project, and then see if you can collaborate with them. Like ask them if you can help in any other way, or what's a good first feature for someone to start out with. And so I would say start small and then start building. Try to identify who the active maintainers are. If they have a Slack or Discord community, jump in and see how you ask around and see how you can help. Usually, there's enough and more work to go around, and people will be willing to point you in the right direction. And I think, I'm assuming that even if it's hardware, there's some level of software to it. So, and you build up your open source profile on GitHub, and you keep building. And once you become an active contributor to one library, that and then you can all the dependencies of that library, that's another, you can expand the scope from there, or any project that uses this project, you can see if you can help any of those those projects. So basically look upstream and downstream of the dependencies, and those are your next set of projects to contribute to, and you can even do that in parallel while you're helping with this one project.
Awesome, got it. And one more question. So you
Yep.
mentioned the usage of Valgrind. So apart from memory leaks, how does it help you overall? Like generally in sorry to interrupt. Generally in my project use case, we generally use it to deploy the some kind of applications on actual hardware. So we see whether actual memory leaks are present, and then we eradicate them. So how about only in software does that help you?
So essentially, you're like running through. I actually don't know exactly under the hood how Valgrind works, but essentially you start the process up with Valgrind, and if there are any unsafe calls or suddenly memory starts to be used a lot, then it tells you, shows you warnings, and you basically try to exercise the different code paths that would at runtime, and it's trying to catch errors based on that and give you warnings. So you're still running the software, but in this special mode where Valgrind is able to pick up these, or or you could dump, like especially if you run into crashes, for example, you can then take that core dump and load it into Valgrind and see uh, if any warnings show up there. So I'd say that's the level of detail that I know Valgrind for. Kishore uses it more. My co-founder Kishore uses it more extensively. So yeah, that's my level of understanding of Valgrind.
Oh, thanks, Tyson. Thanks. Got it. That's it, Akash.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. So sorry, we have Sai here right now, who is another bootstrapped founder, but who's working on Superblog. So yeah, Sai, go ahead with your question.
Hey, Sai.
Hey, thank you, Akash. Thank you, Madhavi, for hosting this. Hey, Jason, been a big fan of your product, man, Typesense. I think I
Thank
spoke
you.
to your co-founder, Kishore, I guess. Like, I loved your product so much. So I tried to integrate it into Superblog because there is
Nice.
search involved in Superblog, and it's
Mm-hmm.
a Jamstack platform. So, but somehow, I ended up tinkering something in-house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, that like we'll see, like how it goes.
Yep.
But anyways, like I saw this bootstrapping and open source SaaS, and I'm like, oh, nice topic, and I thought, who's there? Then I saw your, I'm like, okay, I should just talk to you. So the thing is, it's like, I mean, the topic couldn't be of good timing, better timing for me. I'm looking to launch an open source thing, with the same concept, which I built an internal tool for Superblog. I thought I'll open source it,
Nice.
mostly for the compute purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I can just share about it. So it's an open graph image generator with API. So for like
nice.
thousands of
Okay.
marketing pages, yeah, people can't keep generating images, right? So that, and I'm planning to host it on Vercel, and it's free if it's open source. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll just open source it, and other people also can literally use it. And hopefully, if it takes off, the plan is to make it a SaaS, and have like powerful options, with multiple templates, themes, and all that stuff. So that's the plan. But I would love to know from you, like some thing, because I have like no experience in building this open source. I built few products, but hardly it hit 50 stars. So so anything like that would be a good pointer, like from you, would be really helpful.
Yeah. So first of all, the idea space. So I was actually looking for exactly this. I would say maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I found a couple of SaaS products that do this, but they were a little bit, I would say, overpriced for me to say, okay, let's do. I was basically looking at it for the Typesense documentation, so that if people share links, I wanted to do something
just like GitHub,
how, Yeah, exactly. I wanted to do something like how GitHub shows previews. And then I kind of gave up, and it also, like, the whole site is a static site, like based on ViewPress. So it was, we had, anyway, it was a lot. It seemed like a lot of work to integrate. So if we're able to solve for that, that would be great. So now, in terms of adoption, I mean, I actually don't have like a playbook, I should say. All, like with Typesense, for example, we mainly posted it on Product Hunt and then on Hacker News, and
On Reddit as well. I saw it on Reddit and then I came there.
On Reddit as well, and that's pretty much what we did. The other thing I would say, the important thing I feel like is when you post on any of these platforms, of course, it tends to be hit or miss depending on the total randomness of these platforms. But if something does get a chance to, hit the front page or, make it above the fold in Product Hunt and things like that, you want to make sure that your messaging is super clear, that it resonates with people quickly, because otherwise, even if it makes it to the top, it's going to quickly fall back down if people don't understand
5 seconds
what it is exactly. So I would say, like, do not try to be clever with the wording and the it's like, sure, the product name is okay, but the tagline has to convey super directly what exactly it does. So for example, even in Typesense's case, the very first time we posted it on Hacker News in 2018, we just said fast open source search, and that was kind of blah looking back, and it, I think it went to the front page but stayed there for maybe 6 hours or so, and then it dropped off. But then in 2020 we said open source alternative to Algolia, so we kind of anchored it to something that people already knew, that we knew some people were frustrated with, and so we anchored it to that. And then suddenly it became people started appreciating it, and this time it stayed on the front page for over 24 hours. And so I think that's, so anyway, so that's one thing. The other thing is, so these are, I would say, not scalable ways to, get the word out for sure. It's just if it works for you, amazing. Things become a little bit easier for you. But the more scalable way is to find people who have this problem, have faced this problem before, and try and talk to them and see how you could contribute back to them. So in your case, for example, if there are other, if there are open source projects and their documentation could use this, you could say, hey, I built this thing and here's how it looks, and I built a preview of it here, and visit any of these links and you'll see how it looks like. Basically, do all the work up front and say, would you find this useful? So you're coming in the door with a lot of value delivered with examples of how it's going to work. And then I would say, it's a common saying, like, do things that don't scale. Like, do this a couple of times, even if it takes a lot of time to recruit your first 100 users. And then suddenly those users become your advocates and then start talking about it to others, and then word of mouth spreads from there. So I would say, posting it on all these forums is like good. You should do it, but that's not scalable by any means. You still need to, like, hand recruit your first at least 100 users, I would say.
Sure. That part about reaching out to open source projects, right, for the documentation stuff, it didn't even hit me. Amazing suggestion. Thank you so much, Jason.
Yep.
If it's okay, Akash, I have one more question though. I mean, if it's okay with the team, like, I don't know if we're allowed to ask more questions.
Yeah. Feel free to ask.
Thank you. Jason, this could be kind of personal and internal. Feel free to skip it. But I just want to ask it. Honestly, when I saw this topic and jumped in, I recognized you and I went to your profile.
Uh-huh.
The thing that struck me is, like, it mentioned bootstrapping Typesense.
Uh-huh.
So, see, dude, I've been following search space and open source SaaS space for quite some time. Okay. Gatsby did, like, huge venture capital, and Next.js did with, like, Vercel did with Next.js. Flight, like, Blitz.js is doing that. Like, so many other projects. Like, I think Typesense has huge potential. I mean, and GitHub stars and the product itself, it's crazy. I think anybody should check out the songs demo on his Twitter link. But why are you not going the VC route, which could give you massive scale, and why are you sticking to bootstrapping, especially because this product has a lot of scale?
Yep. I mean, I actually answered this question.
Yeah.
Someone, I think Ankur was asking it, but in short,
sorry.
Yeah. I mean, that's fine. But it's a common question that I actually get. And so I would say in a nutshell, it's mainly because I think the type of problem that we're solving requires a lot of time for the technology to bake. Because, it's like the core algorithms, for example, are something that took, say 3 to 4 years of experimenting and iterating and seeing what works and doesn't work over a lot, that's the amount of time it took. So that's one thing. And so we want to make sure that, if we raise funds, for example, we suddenly have to start hiring, and that all of that is a lot of overhead for us at this point in time, and might detract us from continuing to mature the product. So we want to first focus on that, and also, but I guess philosophically, we want to first make an honest attempt at trying to grow the business with customer revenue first. With Typesense Cloud, and maybe with more GitHub sponsors, and like support agreements, etc. We want to see if we can do that first, and hire based off of that, because I mean with VC capital, there's always an expectation of, in 4 to 5 years you have to become the next big thing, and you have to take over the world, and like in 10 years you're a public company, and you also have to go up market and raise prices and focus on the Fortune 1000. Whereas for us, we want to democratize search. We want this technology to be accessible to as many people as possible and organically. And I think that's not going to be possible even in 10 years, I would say. So if that takes 20 years, we'd want to take that time to be able to do that well, and not scale up too prematurely. So that said, I mean, it's still an open thing where, if things change and if we see a huge opportunity we want to go after, then for sure. But for now, I'd say us staying small and just focusing on, like, every day I wake up, I'm like, okay, what is the next biggest thing that a lot of users are telling us, and I just focus on that. Like, that is a huge satisfying thing to do, and we're able to keep moving fast based on that. Versus, I've seen some founders spend easily 20 to 30 to 40% of their time on fundraising every year, and that is just time I don't want to take away from product building at this point.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense, Jason. And thank you so much, for repeating that. But nice talking to you.
Yep. Oh yeah, likewise.
All right. Thanks, Sai. So we have time for one last question right now, and we've had Moheb waiting for quite a while, quite patiently. So Moheb, why don't you go ahead with your question right now? Moheb, we can't hear you. I do have his question in writing, although I asked him to uh, narrate it himself. So just waiting
Am
for
I
him to.
audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. So hi Jason, hi Akash. So basically, this question is for everyone like who can relate with me, and it's kind of off topic. So just please don't mind. So I just got a job in a SaaS company, and like I'll be starting from Monday, and I'll be on probation period for 6 months. And I just wanted to know how to survive over there, like if I am assigned to a team like which is not productive, good, helpful, or interactive, but the company and everything else is good, and I left my previous company because of the team, and I don't want to do it again. So just a few tips from you guys. Thank you.
Let's see. So, well, first of all, congrats on your new job. I would say the first thing is to try and find low-hanging fruits to solve for the team. Like, I've typically seen that work well, where, because there might be some things that let's say everyone in the team maybe knows that it's a problem, but no one has the time to deal with it because they're all busy with their own stuff. I think if you can identify one or two of those, and, like, for example, maybe there's this one test in the test suite that keeps flaking out all the time, like, that's a good thing to tackle. offer to tackle. And that'll also be a good way for you to get to know the code base. Maybe there's something that in the CI pipeline that's slowing things down in the build process. Like, that's something to tackle. Like, these things are highly visible as well, because if you fix them, a lot of people will be very appreciative that you took the chance to do that. And the nice side benefit of that is that you get to build a rapport with the rest of the team through being helpful. So that's the key thing, I would say, is try to be as helpful as possible for things that the team already knows that it's a problem. So one caveat to this is that it's also very easy to come across as pointing problems out in your in your first month or so. I would recommend, as tempting as it might be, to not do that too early, because you don't want to come across as someone who's just pointing problems, even if you have a solution to it. Like, you don't want to say you don't want to come across as just the squeaky wheel trying to find all the problems. Instead, ask people what the problem, like how you can be helpful and what problems they're already running into, and try to solve them, because you might not have all the context to even deem something as a problem, because it has maybe a ton of historical baggage that certain things are done a certain way. So you don't want to come across as pointing out problems too early. So that's another thing to watch out for. The other thing I've found helpful, like I've done, for example, when onboarding new folks onto the team, is to have there's the team backlog and whatever project management tool the team's using. All of that is fine, but then I would build like a separate board, and I used to use Trello for this, like a separate board for the first 30 days of what needs to be done, like and that would include things like, here are all the people that you need to just set up 30 minutes with them and ask them what they're working on right now. Introduce yourself to them, ask them about the architecture of the things that they're working on. So a lot of people to connect to, and here are the first two major things to focus on as a project. So if whatever the onboarding practice is there, even if they don't have a similar first 30-day plan, I would recommend you to come up with that plan for yourself, maybe in collaboration with your manager, and put that together so that you have a clear picture of how much progress you yourself are making, and share that with your manager and say, hey, here's what I'm using to track how much I'm progressing. Let me know if I can add more things, or if I need to review more documentation, or etc. Like, add those as little tasks for yourself. And I think having that cuts out all the noise in all these other systems, and drains things in, so that what your first 30 days is gonna look like. And then I would say, again, this is something, depends on the team, but I like to see if we can get any new engineer joining the team to see if they can push code to production in the first week, at least. Some companies do first day. Like, if you're able to get code to production, like using whatever their process is, that's a good that's a good milestone to have, at least, if not in the first day or first week, at least in the first 30 days. Even if it's a tiny thing, like seeing your code run all the way to production, I think is a nice feeling. You get to learn a lot through the process as well. Oh, and the other thing is, as you onboard yourself and set up different things on your local machine, for example. Oh, by the way, I assumed you're an engineer, right?
Yes, yes, I am.
Okay.
A
So
backend.
yeah, perfect. So as you're setting up your local machine, and you're following documentation, or maybe the documentation doesn't exist, like, a good thing to do is to keep updating the documentation if it exists, or if it doesn't exist, create that documentation, and then share that with the team and say, if especially if the documentation doesn't exist, share that with the team and say, oh, hey, I put this together based on all the things that I ran into, or all the things that I had to do to get my dev environment set up. And hopefully this could be something that can be passed on to the next person joining the team, and And so that's like ever living documentation as new hires join the team. So that could be one quick way to provide value.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jason. That will be really helpful for me. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Mohib, for the question. So I think this is a good point to end our Twitter space right now. Thanks, Jason, for coming on. I know you're quite busy because of your work at Typesense and personal stuff as well. So thanks for taking the time out today.
Yeah. Happy to chat. This is fun. Thank you for organizing this, Akash.
Yeah, no problem. All right, guys. See you in 2 or 3 weeks here on Twitter Spaces again, and have a nice day.